Alright, today I'm really excited to show you a large grouping of items that have come from a recent estate sale in Texas of a gentleman who served over 20 years in the Army, was a commanding officer of Mike Force in Vietnam, one of the units. But before we get into it, I just wanted to encourage you to go ahead and subscribe to the video channel here. We've got over 20 videos of a lot of different military items from estate sales. Try and discuss a little bit of the history of the original owners of the items, discuss the different versions of the items, and so it's a great resource, I think. Of course, I would say that, but a great resource if you're a collector, a reenactor, or if you're just a reseller and you want to know about what kind of items are really collectible right now. I encourage you to subscribe and like the video. And without further ado, let's take a look at some of the items here. This gentleman, as I said, a little bit of background on him, joined the Army in 1962, was with 82nd Airborne, and after being with 82nd, after about 2 years in 1964, they came to him and said that they did not have enough lieutenants in the Special Forces units, and so he was given the choice of going to Okinawa, Panama, or over to Germany, and he chose to go over to Germany with the 10th Special Forces Group and was there for 2 years from 64 to 66, and that's when his tours in Vietnam began. So first item we got here is a pair of tiger stripe pants. You know, I'm not quite sure. Different people have different names for the patterns. You know, your people are saying, oh, that's Tadpool Sparse, or that's John Wayne, or that's Golden, or it's whatever. I don't know about any of that. I know some of that was just made up in some book. So I just call it tiger stripe. So a pair of tiger stripe pants, and there's the matching jacket or shirt that would go with them. We'll show in a few minutes. You know, one of the positives is they're a pretty good size. I think these are about a 34 waist. You see a lot of these that are like Asian medium, which is like a US extra small. So there's that. Here's another pair of pants, and these are they'd be like the French Indochina, and this called like a lizard pattern camo for paratrooper. And again, it's got the matching jacket to go with them also that we'll show in a few minutes. And here we've got just your standard ripstop jungle pants. And here we've got another pair of tiger stripe pants, and you can see the difference there. Yes, these are two different patterns. This one's a little bit lighter weight, but so in '66, when he was sent over to Vietnam, they put him in charge of the Nha Trang Mike Force unit, and he was the commanding officer. Had to get all the unit to be airborne qualified, which, as he put it, was a hard thing to do for a lot of the native people in Vietnam, because some of them weren't even really used to wearing shoes necessarily, and so to get them to jump out of a plane was certainly a little bit of a shock for some of them, I'm sure. This was an award that was kind of presented to him, and we see it was from the Mike Force unit. It's got a date on there of December of 1966. And it says, ring the bell for freedom. So that's kind of a neat thing. You see here, you had multiple field coats. Like this one here, I believe we see it's direct embroidered. He's got his U.S. jump wing combat infantry badge. Or here we see Vietnamese jump wings. And we see here for this would have been between his tours. He ended up doing 3 tours in Vietnam between 66 and 70. I believe this field coat would have been from around 1968 when he came back to the U.S. Was an instructor at Fort Benning for a little while. We see over here his combat unit being Special Forces. And we see this one here. This would actually have been a field coat that he wore in Vietnam. We see that, you know, his current unit being Special Forces, and he was Ranger qualified. And we see this here, the silk patch on the pocket. That's for the LLDB, Vietnamese Special Forces. And of course, being full color, patches on there kind of dates it to a certain particular time. And his rank at that point was a major, which I think he was promoted to major in 68. So probably not much difference in time between this one and the other field coat. It's just one he wore in Vietnam and the other one he would have worn stateside at Fort Benning. And earlier I'd shown you the pants, the lizard pattern pants, so this is the matching jacket to go with it. And usually when you see these, they don't have anything on them. So it was kind of neat that it has his name still on there, Wilson, and has his U.S. jump wings. You see his Ranger qualification tab. And one more field coat. And this looks like another one that he probably wore when he was at Fort Benning between tours in Vietnam. And there's a bunch of photos of him online if you go and you look at there's a couple of Facebook groups for the Mike Force units, in particular for Operation Harvest Moon. There's a bunch of photos of this gentleman. We see this tiger stripe shirt here is actually one that it's got the quartermaster stamp in it. And I believe, I could be wrong on this, but I believe the 63 is actually the year that shirt would have been made. Of course, he wasn't in Vietnam till 66. And I could be wrong on that date, but I thought that's the way that the quartermasters did their date codes. But, you know, we see he's got his Vietnamese jump wings there. And we see that this shirt was probably worn quite a bit, because we see some of the threads coming off of. And we see he's got his, you know, rather than saying U.S. Army, it's saying Mike Force. And then we see the Mike Force patch there. You know, sometimes you'll see the silk one and it's all one piece with the airborne. And then, for whatever reason, this one, he's got a U.S. made airborne tab or arc. And then the Mike Force pocket patch. So that's kind of a neat piece. And here we see if you've seen some of the other videos when I was talking about jungle shirts and different patterns, you'll know that this is a second pattern shirt where it's got the epaulets on the shoulders, and it's got the little hang tag here. But so this one we see again, you know, kind of like one of the field coats where he's got a lot of it direct embroidered on here. And this is the subdued version of the LLDB. And we see here, sometimes people will see this and they'll wonder, well, what is that supposed to mean? And that's actually the Army of Republic of Vietnam's rank for major. And I think it was for, since he was working with a lot of the Vietnamese, they may not have recognized his collar rank of being major, but you know, if they saw this on his uniform, they recognized that to know he was a major. And we also see on the pockets, You know, rather than just using the buttons, he had put some little snaps on there. You know, just some little modifications in the field, make it easier to use. And we see again, you know, that these are U.S. made Special Forces, Airborne, and Ranger. And let's see what else we've got here. We've got another tiger stripe shirt. Again, you know, fairly similar to the one we saw earlier. A lot of the same mock-up on it with patches and placement. But when we go to this next one here, again, going to have pretty similar. But one of the differences of the two different Mike Force patches, and we also see, like I mentioned before, about how you've got a separate U.S. made Airborne tab, and this one it's all one piece. And they're both silk. So that's the main difference on those two. They look to be basically the same kind of pattern of tiger stripe. And again, you see, you know, pretty similar. You know, he had a bunch of these, I'm guessing, wearing them every day. And we see some of them he had, you know, most of these he made in the short sleeve, but he put a little pouch up there for a little pocket. So that's kind of cool. And here we got another second pattern shirt. Again, you know, fairly similar to the previous one. And one thing we see on the shoulder here, that the Ranger tab here would have been something that was made in country versus a U.S. made Airborne. Here's a tiger stripe Boonie hat. Looks like he wore it quite a bit. Had a fairly small head. And yet another, he had quite the grouping of tiger stripe uniforms. And we see how I was mentioning before about sizing. You know, you had the Asian size, you know, it'd be like A-S for small, and then you had the US sizing, you know, US-S for small. Well, this one was a US large, which I think was the largest size that they made. But we also see he shortened the overall length of the shirts. You know, I guess he didn't like them being real long. You know, maybe didn't like tucking them in so much. Be a little in a hot climate. Here we see some field gear he had. You know, some different pouches and stuff. And I'm not quite sure what this pouch is. If you know what it is, feel free to comment on the video here and let me know what you think it is. And here we got another. This one, unlike the other ones that were more of a second pattern with the epaulets, this one's a ripstop one. So this would be more like a fourth pattern shirt. And we see that, I'm not sure if the Special Forces patch that he had there is, you know, it's almost like it's stained the shirt. You know, we see that the Ranger tab was a Vietnamese made one, so, you know, maybe there was some ink in the patch or something, that a dye that soaked into the shirt, so even once it was gone you could still see a real outline of it. And let's see what else we've got here. We've already gone over these pants. We've got this here is a hot wet weather survival kit. I haven't taken it out of this like waterproof bag because it looks like it hasn't been out of there probably since the 60s. It looks to be a really tight fit, but they made this, they had a reserve and operational, so I don't know which one that is. Didn't want to really pull it out of the bag, didn't want to tear it, but these were carried by a lot of the special forces and long-range recon patrol, those kind of things like that. Here we see like a scarf or neckerchief, ascot, kind of made out of the parachute material. Another survival kit, another like a, this one's a individual survival kit, kind of just like a variation of the hot and wet weather one. Here's a map bag. I don't know if his name on there, Major Lee B. Wilson. See a Claymore bag, with his name on there. See some suspenders and butt pack, canteen, some other belts, and then one last thing here I'll show you. These were all letters that he had written from Vietnam, and we see, when we look on here, and it'll say like HHC for headquarters company, 5th Special Forces Group, and then on this, I'm going to see if we can find another one here that has, it says like MSFTC, and that was for Mobile Strike Force Training Center, 5th Special Forces Group, so that would be like Mike Force. But, he's got over 100 letters here of, written to his wife while he was in Vietnam. I think they all date from like 68 to 70. And here's some different photos of when he was at Fort Benning in 64. And let me see, there was like a little newspaper clipping. And there were a few other photos, but in general, like I said, there's over 100 letters there. I'm sure they tell a lot of interesting stories of what was going on during that time period. And that about wraps it up. Like I said, this was a gentleman that served over 20 years, and really between 66 and 70, he did 3 tours in Vietnam, and during that time he did 4 combat jumps. If you'd like to know a little more information on this gentleman, I encourage you to check online. There's a Voices of Veterans website where they did quite a few different audio interviews with different veterans, and there's an hour-long interview with Lieutenant Colonel Wilson. I believe it's about 10 years ago. And there's also, I said, you can check some of the Facebook Mike Force groups, in particular one that it's got about 60 photos from Operation Harvest Moon, and there's a bunch of photos of, at that time he was Major Wilson. He's fairly easy to pick out of the photos because he seems to always have a cigar in his mouth, even when he's on the plane getting ready to do their jump. But it's quite interesting to find some this size of collection from, like I said, somebody who had done 4 combat jumps, and I'm sure he did countless training jumps when they were trying to get the unit airborne qualified. I know he mentioned in the Voices of Veteran interview that when they were first trying to convince these indigenous, the Highland residents there in Vietnam, the Montgards, and they were trying to convince them, it's going to be safe to jump out of a plane. And what he came to the conclusion was, if they had one of the U.S. Special Forces jump out of the plane first, then a lot of these guys would say, if they're jumping out of the plane, it must be safe, so they would go ahead and do it. And so I'm sure they had to do quite a few different training jumps, and certainly a gentleman who spent a lot of time in Vietnam and came very close with the Montgarde, and also with a lot of the Chinese who were in Vietnam. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Like I said in the beginning, I know it's been a little bit of a long video, but I hope that, like I said, mentioned in the beginning, that you will like this video, subscribe, pass it on to other collectors or reenactors, or like I said, if you're just a reseller, this is some different collectible things. Give you a little more information on that, and like I said, I encourage you to check online for more information on this gentleman, and thanks for watching.